It's the final topic of this chapter, which is price elasticity of supply. The concept is quite similar to price elasticity of demand, but the focus has switched because in price elasticity of demand, our focus was on buyers and consumers, whereas in price elasticity of supply, our focus switches from buyers, consumers towards firms and suppliers. So, it refers to how much quantity supplied is sensitive to changes in price level. For example, when price of a good changes, as it increases or decreases, how easily or how quickly the suppliers can react to these changes. So we are aware of law of supply. There is a direct relationship of price and quantity supplied. As price rises, suppliers want to supply more. As price decreases, they supply less because price is an incentive for firms and suppliers to expand their production and supply more. So that is why the value you obtain via the formula, which is percentage change in quantity supplied over percentage change in price, is a positive value. It is positive due to law of supply. There is a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. So we say that quantity supplied and price are sensitive to changes in price level when, let's say, a small change in price can lead the suppliers to react to the changes quickly. For instance, if there is a decrease in price, suppliers can easily cut down on the commodities, or if there is an increase in price, they can quickly supply more, which I understand is prevalent for manufacturing goods. But what if the commodity is an agricultural good which takes time to grow more, let's say fruits, vegetables, or even poultry? So they possess an inelastic demand. Even prices increasing or decreasing, you cannot quickly supply more or supply less because of nature of commodity. Here you have two graphs. One is a scenario of inelastic supply and another one is for elastic supply. So if you notice the shape of the curves for inelastic, remember I mentioned the curve would be steeper, whereas for elastic, the curve would be flat. So referring towards the first graph, we're analyzing the market of fruits and the supply curve is inelastic. Remember, elasticity depends upon the determinants like there is time horizon, long run and short run, even necessities versus luxury goods. There is definition of market too. So there are several determinants. Even the nature of commodity determines elasticity. So inelastic supply means that if your price changes, quantity supplied does changes, but not much in comparison to changes in prices. So here, referring to this graph, you notice price has risen a lot considerably, but you notice quantity has not increased a lot as compared to changes in prices. So in this scenario, we say quantity supplied is not sensitive to changes in price level. And here it's because of the nature of commodity. Generally, agricultural goods like fruits, vegetables, you have poultry, dry fruits, nuts, wheat, rice, like all these commodities takes a lot of time. So you cannot just quickly increase or decrease supply if price of any good is rising. It takes time for them to grow, to develop, harvest, and all that process. So that's why the supply curve for agricultural commodity is inelastic because suppliers cannot react immediately towards changes in price level. So coming towards another case which is elastic supply. So generally supply is elastic for goods which has a lot of substitutes, or you're talking about different brands offering same commodities. even for manufacturing commodities, which you just manufacture via plants, tools, equipments, machineries. So there you can control the supply. So here I'm analyzing the market of beverages, let's say Coke, Pepsi, Fanta. So you notice there is a small change in price, but this change leads to a big change in quantity supplied. Remember, price is an incentive for suppliers to supply more. So for manufacturing commodities, they can quickly react to changes in supply. So when price is rising, they can supply more easily and quickly. So as you all are aware that elasticity has several determinants. But when we're talking about price elasticity of demand, time horizon is the most important determinant. You know that in economics you have a short run scenario and a long run scenario. So you should be very clear on the difference of short run and long run. And generally student ask question that how long is long run or how short is the short run. So remember, long run and short run, they do not refer to a specific period of time. Like you cannot say 1 month is short run or 5 years is long run. They are quite conceptual time frames. Like there are several definitions, but primary difference is that in short run period, the quantity of at least one input is fixed. But in the long run, the quantities of all inputs can be variable. So this is the major difference between short run and long run scenario. So we're analyzing the market of carrots. So you know carrots is regarded as an agricultural commodities. So first we will see the short run scenario and then the long run. You first draw the short run supply curve. Short run supply curve would be inelastic because as a supplier, if market price of carrot is rising, you cannot just click your fingers and you can have a lot of carrots overnight or within 2 days or within a week. And even you have limited land. So you cannot just increase the supply of any agricultural commodity overnight or within a month or within few weeks. It takes a good considerable amount of time. And other than time, you need more resources like land and maybe more tools and equipments. So for short run, when price rises, even if it rises a lot, you cannot supply more. But if you look at the same commodity, which is market of carrots, and you're talking about long run, so if you will analyze that, okay, it has been a long time that market price of carrots are rising considerably. So in long run, you can buy maybe more land and you can have more carrots. So that's how things work. In long run, even if there is a small change in price, you can quickly react, as in you can supply more. And as market price decreases, you have enough time to supply less, or let's say market price of tomatoes rises, so you can have some carrot fields and some tomatoes. So you can do a lot in long run because your inputs are variables. But in short run, all inputs are not variable. There is limitation of some resource like land, capital, or time even. So remember, time horizon is the most crucial determinant. And this is the main limitation that farmers face, that they cannot just raise their supply within few days or overnight. Like price elasticity of demand, remember there are 5 types of curves. Same is the case for price elasticity of supply. There are 5 types of supply curves. So you are aware of the first two, inelastic supply, where the shape of the curve is steep, and here the coefficient value is less than 1. Then you have elastic supply, where the shape of the supply curve is comparatively flatter and the coefficient value is greater than 1. The third one is unit elastic, and if you notice, unit elastic supply curve is the usual supply curve which we draw. Even unit elastic demand curve was the usual demand curve we draw. It wasn't so flat, it wasn't either steeper, it was the normal shape. So here the coefficient value is equal to 1. And then for perfectly inelastic and perfectly elastic supply, the curves are exactly similar as like the demand curves. Even the coefficient values are similar. So you compare the coefficient value of demand and supply, you will notice that the values are same. There is just a switch from consumers to suppliers. That's all. For PED, you were thinking as a buyer. For PES, you're thinking as a supplier. So, like I covered all the coefficient values of price elasticity of demand, I won't be covering all cases that how do you calculate a coefficient value. I have done that for price elasticity of demand. You just have to plug in the values and then you see why it's less than 1 or greater than 1 or whatever the coefficient is. But I'd like to explain a bit about the extreme cases like perfectly inelastic supply and perfectly elastic supply. So generally we all are aware that these extreme cases 100% they do not exist, but partially they do. So in perfectly inelastic supply, you notice as the price is changing, here it's rising. The quantity supplied is fixed. And you know the law of supply is as price rises, quantity supplied rises. But in this scenario, it's not increasing because it's an extreme scenario. And a good example is a natural resource like extraction of coal or timber, even fossil fuels or gold, even extraction of oils. Because you know, these mining companies, they cannot react to changes based on daily, weekly basis or monthly basis. There are several reasons. First of all, it's with respect to, it's not easier to explore and it's so expensive to explore these natural resources. Second, you have to take permission from the state to extract and drill and go through all that process. And third, let's suppose even if price decreases, you cannot immediately shut down or stop supplying, or if price increases, you open up again due to change in prices on day-to-day basis. That's because the commitments are very longer with respect to having commitments with states and overall process and the setup, the fixed and variable costs are too high. So you cannot react to changes due to prices in this scenario. Other than that, the nature of commodity varies as well. Now you might say that, okay, you cannot store any agricultural good longer like a fruit because they would rot, but you can store coal, you can store oil, you can store gold, but remember, storing these goods, it's very expensive. So you cannot bear the inventory cost. So in simpler words, it's perfectly inelastic supply. Regardless changes in price, quantity supplied would be fixed. There would be no change in quantity supplied, and when there is no change for QS, it would be 0. And let's suppose the change in price is 20. You divide, you get the value 0. So this is the case of perfectly elastic supply, and like the previous case, it's an extreme scenario with no perfect example, but I still found a close example. So you can have high-end brands here like Gucci, Prada, Chanel, Jimmy Choo. So if you refer to the graph, you see that the price is constant. You cannot change your price regardless the quantity is changing or not. Because if you change the price, you collapse. For example, if you decrease the price, the supply would be zero. And if you read about these brands before arrival of new product line, new season, they never put items on sale like a 50% off or 70% off, and they don't even give the left items to charity. They simply burn the commodities because they are not willing to supply at a lower price. And as you know, the coefficient value of perfectly elastic supply is infinity, as in it's unlimited. So if the price increases, they raise the price, there will be unlimited supply. Because already these high-end brands, they are earning a lot, they're making a lot of profit. So they would be willing to supply any quantity. So that's why if the price increases, the supply would be infinite, as in it's unlimited due to the law of supply. But if the price decreases, the supply would be zero. They would rather burn the commodities, rather put items on sale or give it to charity. So regarding how do you prove its infinity with respect to the formula? So you divide anything by zero, you know price will not change. So change in price is zero. Anything divided by zero, the answer is infinity. So finally, I have an application scenario, which is what happens to market equilibrium when there is an advancement in technology of wheat. So as it's an application question, it means that you apply the concept of demand supply and even the determinants of demand supply and also elasticity. So to solve the question, you first analyze the nature of commodity. Here we're talking about wheat, and you know wheat, it's considered as a necessity good in our economy. So when it's necessity, and even you know that wheat cannot, like, the market price of wheat, whether it rises or decreases, this farmers cannot supply more or less. Even currently we're having a wheat crisis, we are having limitation of wheat since few months, and still we are not able to produce more wheat because you need a typical season for that, and there are some more elements in consideration to this. So it means wheat has an inelastic demand and inelastic supply. So for inelastic demand and inelastic supply, it means the shape of both curves would be steeper. It won't be flat. So you first draw inelastic curves, demand, supply, and then the question says what happens to market equilibrium when there is an advancement in technology. So now you have to analyze whether it's a direct shifter of demand or supply. So if you remember, advancement in technology is a direct shifter of supply. Advancement in technology of a specific good means that you can produce more using less resources, like maybe less money, less time, or less capital, less labor. So it's saving your cost of production and your profit revenue is raising. So in that scenario, as a supplier, you choose to supply more. So your supply curve shifts towards right. So now you reach at a new equilibrium point with a less price and higher quantity. So that's all for this chapter, elasticity, and I expect you to read the book and solve the questions, application questions, so you will be more clear on these topics.